Your role lacks synergy, the CEO said, firing me right before the $100 million investor demo. During the presentation, the entire platform went dark. Our lawyer found my contract, his face went white, and he just pointed. The CEO read it and his jaw hung open. Not with a pink slip. Not with some HR drone pretending to cry. Just a dull beep from the turnstile and a security guard squinting at me like I was trying to sneak into a Jonas Brothers concert with a fake ID. I stood there in the lobby holding a cup of gas station coffee and a USB drive in my pocket that contained the entire deployment cert for our flagship platform. 5 years of my life, every patch, workaround, back-end miracle coded at 3 a.m. when the system would have collapsed without it, summed up in a 64-gigabyte stick I carried like a crucifix. And now the building was treating me like a trespasser. Try again, I said. The guard shrugged. 2 more beeps, then a sigh. He picked up the phone and mumbled something to facilities. I stood there under the flickering fluorescent light while 2 interns walked past whispering. Wasn't that the old engineer? The one with the crazy desk plants? Still here, I said, loud enough for them to hear. The elevator dinged. No badge required to go up. Yet, by the time I reached the 6th floor I knew something was off. My nameplate was missing. My desk, neatly stacked with a banker's box like some intern had prepped it for a charity drive. The only thing left untouched was the ridiculous stress ball shaped like a flaming dumpster gifted to me after a 72-hour production outage I alone fixed. They probably thought it was a toy. It was a trophy. That's when I saw the Slack message timestamped 3:13 a.m. from the new CEO. Team, we've officially sunset legacy dev workflows. Moving forward, we'll be implementing a leaner synergized in-for strategy. Also, we're streamlining personnel to align with long-term KPIs. Translation, we fired the people who actually knew how things worked. He'd only been here 6 weeks. Showed up with the charisma of a high school prom king and the technical depth of Puddle. He asked me once if Git was short for GitHub, called our old SSO pipeline Frankenstein's login. Smirked when I told him parts of the codebase were tied to legacy encryption keys. Not because it was funny but because he didn't understand a word and thought that was my failure. His first team meeting, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "We're going to make this ship sail smoother, Captain. I don't sail. I patch holes and keep water out while everyone else gets drunk on the deck." He started with the product team, half of them gone before lunch one Tuesday. Then marketing, finance, the whole QA team, which was just one guy named Ron with carpal tunnel and a heart of gold. Called it cutting the fat. I was next. I could feel it. Meetings I wasn't invited to. Jira tickets were routed around me. Interns asking where's the documentation like that was a real thing in this place. Like anyone else had time to write down the daily CPR, we gave this platform to keep it breathing. So I started documenting. Oh, did I start? Screenshots, Git logs, internal memos, old Slack threads, where I explicitly warned about access dependencies and failsafe triggers. Even dug out my original employment agreement from a dusty Gmail folder. Paragraph 14b, highlighted like a neon middle finger. In the event of termination, access credentials linked to the signatory shall deactivate associated cryptographic authentication assets in all production and demonstration environments unless reassigned via pre-signed certificate. That was the clause. The I'm not doing unpaid weekends without a dead man switch clause. Negotiated it back when we had no budget and I was working 90-hour weeks to keep the platform alive. Nobody read it. Not even legal. They just needed me too badly to argue back then. Funny how quickly they forget the deals they make when you're the only one left who remembers where the landmines are buried. Now that landmine was ticking. But they didn't know that. Not yet. I walked back to my desk, clicked on the read-only dashboard access I still had. Watched the system heartbeat. Everything was green, for now. They had no idea they'd just fired the keeper of the keys. The moment I saw the glass-walled meeting room, corner office, blinds wide open like a fish tank for humiliation, I knew I was the day's entertainment. The CEO was already in there, legs crossed like he was posing for a discount cologne ad, sipping something from a branded tumbler like he'd earned it. And beside him, HR. Marlene from payroll, who knew my birthday and once covered for me when I cried in the break room over deployment failure. No, this was Brad, full-time compliance lapdog. Part-time emotional support poodle for executive decisions. "Hey there," Brad said with the voice of someone who's Googled how to fire someone without getting sued. I sat down slowly. No handshake, no smile. I placed my coffee between us like a line in the sand. CEO folded his hands. "Let's talk about alignment. Here we go." He leaned forward like we were co-conspirators in some great vision. The company is pivoting, evolving, and frankly, we're in need of roles that, how do I put this, bring synergy across verticals. I didn't blink. Synergy. Yes, he said, nodding like a bobblehead. We've identified redundancies, areas where, let's be honest, legacy frameworks are clogging innovation pipelines. Translation: you cost too much and don't kiss my ass enough. Brad slid a printed packet across the table. My name was misspelled. I didn't touch it. This is just standard documentation, he said quickly. No need to sign anything now. We just want to have a conversation. A conversation like we're breaking up in a Starbucks. Like this is just some miscommunication between colleagues, not a corporate decapitation. I looked through the glass. Outside, intern was microwaving fish again. Ron from QA was arguing with a printer like it owed him rent. The company I'd helped build one Patch Jenkins job at time was still chugging along, and I was about to be cut loose like a burnt wire. I looked back at the CEO. Let me guess. This decision was made after evaluating KPIs and ROI over a 6-month cohort analysis. He blinked. Exactly. Yes. He had no idea what any of that meant. Nodded. Cool. Cool, he said, voice wobbling slightly. I stood up. Yep. Wait, don't you want to go over? Nope. Brad flinched as I pushed the packet back across the table with one finger. I'll have my lawyer review anything worth reading. And with that, I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I didn't yell, "You'll regret this," like some made-for-TV martyr. I just walked back to my desk, grabbed my stress ball, my USB, the crusty coffee mug with world's 12th best engineer on the side. Then I logged out of my email and looked at the dashboard one last time. Heartbeat still green. My credentials were still valid, but not for long. They thought they'd eliminated a bottleneck. What they actually did was cut off the only oxygen tube keeping their shiny new product alive, and I knew something they didn't. The investor demo was tomorrow. Demo environment, still tied to my signature, till authenticated through the master encryption keys embedded in my employment credential profile, because nobody had ever reassigned them. Why? Because nobody else could. The docs didn't exist. I was the docs. The second HR entered that room and said, moving forward, the countdown had started. I walked out of that building feeling nothing. Not rage, not grief, just precision, cold, clean clarity. Let the demo begin. The last thing I ever did for that company, final act of service they didn't even know they needed, was click sign deployment cert. Timestamp, 7:46 p.m. Location: my crappy kitchen table, crusted over with takeout containers and a dead aloe plant that had the same survival rate as our QA team. My work laptop sat between a stack of unpaid bills and a half-empty bottle of NyQuil I sometimes sipped instead of wine. The cert blinked on screen. Deployed to demo environment confirmed. That was it. 5 years of obsessive, duct-taped architecture. Humming quietly beneath a UI no one understood. I used to joke that our platform ran on caffeine, luck, and one very old cron job I named Frank because he behaved like a drunk uncle. Reliable until he wasn't. What the CEO didn't understand, what no one understood, because no one had ever bothered to read the boring back-end documentation I never wrote, was how the encryption lattice was tied together. Our demo and production environments were separated by a security protocol I helped design during one of our earliest funding scrambles. Back when we couldn't afford enterprise tools and had to build our own access control with rubber bands and cryptographic elbow grease. We cobbled it together using asymmetric keys, multi-level trust signatures, a little trick I picked up from a defunct open-source repo no longer maintained by anyone who still owned socks. It worked, but it was fragile, deliberately. Because I insisted we needed a fallback, something to protect us from burnout, overtime abuse, or another one of our investors asking if we could ship faster by skipping QA entirely. So I built a clause into the system itself. The signing credentials, the ones used to approve a deployment, weren't just stamps, they were triggers, kill switches. If a credential holder was terminated, voluntarily or otherwise, their access was revoked and so was everything they'd ever authenticated. No reassignment, no environment, simple, brutal, silent. And now, with a click, I had just signed off on the final deployment certificate for the investor demo environment. The system chirped happily at me. Success. Environment ready. No one else knew it yet, but this demo, one with the fireworks and promises and hopeful eyes from VC firms who wore $900 shoes to pitch meetings, was mine. Every login, every API key, every authentication token passed through a master authority. And I was that authority. Or, at least, I was until they decided I lacked synergy. I sipped my NyQuil, not for sleep, but ceremony. Then I opened the terminal, typed a single command to verify access, watched the green lights cascade down the screen. Still good. Still live. Then I did what no one expected. I logged out. One clean exit. No backdoors. No sabotage. Just the truth of the system doing what it was built to do. Because the moment my account got flagged as terminated in our internal directory, and oh yes, HR would be so proud once they filed it officially, the architecture would recognize the loss of the authorized signatory. Key authority would vanish. The authentication engine? Locked out. No login. No reset. No demo. That clause in my contract, paragraph 14b, wasn't just a legal failsafe. It was a functional one, and I'd buried it like a bone no one ever thought they'd need to dig up. I shut the laptop. The room was silent except for the faint hum of my refrigerator wheezing its last breath. They thought I was gone, but in 24 hours, we're going to find out who really left who. And the best part? I hadn't broken a single rule. The champagne was already sweating. They had the good stuff out too. Veuve. Not the corner store Prosecco they usually cracked open for product launches. I saw it in the background of a LinkedIn photo someone from marketing posted at 9:12 a.m. Caption: Big day for the team. Streamlined, scalable, sexy. 3 astiques. That's how I knew the CEO wrote it. Stood there front and center in that photo. Arms draped around people he couldn't name a week ago. Flashing veneers that had never tasted a 4 a.m. deployment crash. His caption: Demo day. Let's show them what a modern team can do. Modern team. I was home, wrapped in a blanket that had holes from the cat I never adopted, sipping coffee from the same mug I carried out like a war relic. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Kind of silence that presses in around you like a fog. But it wasn't loneliness. It was waiting. Focused. Sharpened. Surgical. My laptop was open to one tab only. The internal status dashboard. Read only. The last scrap of access they hadn't revoked yet because no one thought to look. I couldn't change anything but I could watch, and so I did. 9:47 a.m. Green lights. System load nominal. Environment live. 9.51. Pre-demo warm-up initialized. Login spiking. Back-end latency within thresholds. 9.54. Demo timer appears on the upper right corner, set by someone in engineering who still hadn't removed my dashboard filters. Demo start equals 600. 10 minutes. I imagine them buzzing like bees inside that glass fortress. Product managers adjusting pitch decks. Designers fussing over button styles. Interns triple-checking camera angles. Someone probably left to pick up gluten-free bagels just in case. And in the eye of the storm, the CEO, Mr. Synergy himself, floating through it all like a quarterback who didn't realize the offensive line quit at halftime. I knew his type. Would charm a crowd of investors while the servers caught fire, blame legacy tech debt for his own oversight, then fly business class home and cry into his expense report. I refreshed the dashboard again. 9.57. 03. Green. All green. But I knew something they didn't. I wasn't just watching a platform. I was watching a countdown. Because somewhere behind all those buzzwords and banners and catered croissants, a server was ticking toward a reckoning. One that didn't come with sirens or flashing red alerts. No explosions. Just a quiet, irreversible vacuum. Because once the system recognized my employment status as terminated, which, based on time-stamped HR filings, would officially roll through in less than 5 minutes, the authentication engine would rerun its trust checks. And it wouldn't find me. And if it didn't find me, it didn't find the keys. And if it didn't find the keys, it found nothing. 9.58.41. The dashboard flickered slightly. Normal refresh behavior. But I knew better. The login audit trail was already thinning, less volume coming through. Weird dip that didn't belong this close to a demo start. 9.59.03. I sipped my coffee. Lukewarm now. I imagined the investors watching the intro video. Smiling people. Quick cuts. Fake Slack messages about customer impact. And B-roll of diverse people pointing at graphs. The CEO would be grinning, head bobbing to the music. Ready to talk scale, growth, disruption. And then the clock would hit 0. And all the lights, they'd go out. By me. Not by sabotage, by design. By neglect. By arrogance. I clicked refresh one last time. 10.00.00. And then silence. The first glitch didn't look like much. The main login screen froze mid-animation. Just a spinning circle. Nothing dramatic. One of the junior engineers probably thought it was a Wi-Fi hiccup. Maybe a bad cache token. Easy fix. Someone in the back whispered, "Try refreshing." The screen blinked. Everything locked. Authentication error. Across every instance. Demo environment. Admin dashboard. Customer portal. Dead. At first, the investors didn't notice. They were still smiling, nodding politely, half listening while the CEO chirped on about modular architecture and seamless scalability. Behind him, the demo laptop sat on a sleek little pedestal, connected to a 90-inch monitor, frozen. The clicker in his hand, suddenly useless. His forehead began to glisten under the stage lights. "Just a quick technical delay," he said, voice high-pitched like someone trying to ignore a leaking pipe mid-wedding vow. One of the engineers ducked below the table. Another sprinted to the back of the room, whispering into a headset like they were defusing a bomb. Someone from IT appeared out of nowhere, laptop in hand, fingers slamming keys. I knew that posture. It was the universal language of "oh God, oh no, oh please work, please work, please work." Still nothing. Two investors leaned in, murmuring. One of them, an older man with a salt and pepper beard, and the posture of someone who'd watched startups burn before, asked plainly, "Is this part of the demo?" That was the moment the CEO cracked. Just a twitch at the corner of his eye, like a man realizing the brakes are gone, and he's still barreling down the highway. "No, no. Just a minor connectivity hiccup," he said, waving his hand. "Let's pivot to the slide deck." But the slide deck was in the platform. And the platform was gone. Across the office, phones lit up. Internal Slack channels exploded. Someone in customer success yelled, "Why can't I log in?" It wasn't just the demo. It was everything. API calls failing. Admin console 403 forbidden. Reboot commands rejected. Engineer on the floor paled as his terminal spit out a single line in bold red. Auth engine failure. Trust signatory revoked. He turned to the IT lead. "What the hell does that mean?" "Check the audit logs," she snapped. He did. Silence. Then slowly, he read aloud. "Revoked credentials. Terminated signatory. Triggered at 10:0003. And that's when the panic really hit. The CEO stepped off the stage, voice low, barking at anyone who would listen. "What the hell is a terminated signatory? Who has root override? Someone fix this." But no one answered. Because there was no override. Because there was no other signatory. Just me, and I wasn't in the building. I wasn't even in the Slack. I was at home, reclined on my couch, watching it unfold like the world's slowest car crash. The dashboard, my read-only window, was now blank. No heartbeat. No logs. No users. Just a clean, sterile screen blinking, unauthorized. I sipped the last of my cold coffee and leaned back. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled. Because there's a kind of peace that comes when everything you warn them about, every buried clause, every ignored risk, comes due at the exact second you said it would. This wasn't sabotage. This was prophecy. Ignored. Then fulfilled. And I still hadn't lifted a finger. Down in the legal den, 2 floors below where the champagne was already being quietly wheeled out, General Counsel Russell Callahan was having a spiritual crisis. Not the kind involving God or meaning. The kind involving liability and his name on a contract he definitely should have read more carefully 5 years ago. He'd been mid-scone when the Slack pinged. Urgent. Demo M down. Auth system offline, then another. Potential breach. Then get legal. Now. Russell, man who prided himself on never eating lunch before noon, threw his half-bitten pastry across the conference room and bolted for the records archive. The room smelled like toner and regret. 3 interns were already pulling files like their scholarships depended on it. When Russell burst in, one of them flinched hard enough to drop an entire folder labeled Key Staff Legacy. "Find her contract," he barked. Breath ragged. Full version. Not the summary. They did. Eventually, buried in a banker's box labeled Archive Proceed Agreements under a crusty NDA and a half-burn HR policy document. Thick paper. Blue ink. Wet signature. Annotated. And right there, poking out like a middle finger from a filing cabinet, was a yellow sticky note in his own handwriting from 2018. "Do not lose this. Weird clause revisit someday." Someday had arrived. Russell's hands shook as he flipped to paragraph 14b, remembered the negotiation, vaguely. Back when the company was on life support and she was pulling 90-hour weeks to keep it alive. She didn't ask for a raise. She asked for insurance. And he, idiot, caffeinated, desperate, had agreed. It read, "Upon termination of employment, all credential-linked cryptographic permissions granted to the employee shall deactivate immediately and irrevocably, triggering fail-safe shutdown procedures for all systems authenticated by said credentials, including but not limited to demo environments, production systems, and internal admin platforms, unless preemptively reassigned by the employee in writing prior to termination." He read it again, then a third time. Then he sat down very, very slowly. A junior associate hovered behind him. "What's it say?" Russell didn't answer. Just turned the page toward the associate, pointed and whispered, "Oh my God," because it wasn't just a quirky clause, it was structural. Her credentials weren't just linked, they were the root. When they terminated her, they didn't just fire a senior engineer. They amputated the keystone of the platform. The CEO barged in without knocking. Sweating through his shirt, Did you find it? Is it her? What did she do? Russell didn't look up. She didn't do anything. CEO blinked. What? She didn't sabotage. She didn't hack. She didn't override. Russell pushed the contract across the table. You did this. The room went quiet except for the buzzing fluorescent light overhead. The CEO scanned the page, his mouth moving as he read slowly, carefully, like he was sounding out ancient Latin. Paragraph 14b stopped him cold. Wait, he said, voice cracking. This is real? Russell's face said it all. There was no fix. No override. No backup key. No alternate signatory. Because no one had ever bothered to assign one. Because no one thought she'd leave. Because no one read the contract. She did nothing. And that's why it was perfect. Russell leaned back in his chair. You didn't fire an engineer, he muttered. You fired the lock and the key. And the CEO. He finally stopped talking. The boardroom was too quiet. Not the respectful kind of quiet you get before a major announcement. This was clinical, surgical. The kind of silence that creeps in right before someone admits they've just accidentally launched a torpedo into their own ship. The CEO stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up like he'd been personally troubleshooting servers. He hadn't. His palms were damp, voice brittle. In front of him lay a single piece of paper, her contract, printed, highlighted, and trembling slightly in his hand. He cleared his throat and read it aloud. He was testifying in his own trial, triggering fail-safe shutdown procedures for all systems authenticated by said credentials, unless preemptively reassigned by the employee in writing prior to termination. He stopped. A beat passed. Someone shifted in their leather chair. Another tapped their phone screen, checking time or maybe escape routes. Across the table, one of the lead investors, a wiry guy with tortoiseshell glasses and the resting face of a funeral director, slowly set his iPad down. So, he said flatly, your star engineer, the one who built the foundation of this platform, had termination-linked credential authority baked into your most mission-critical environments. The CEO opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Another investor, older, blue suit, gold watch, lifted a single eyebrow. And you didn't reassign those credentials before you let her go. I wasn't informed. Was it your job to be informed? Someone else cut in. The air was getting thinner. And then, in unison, like actors in a stage play they'd rehearsed 100 times, 3 different investors stood up from the table and muttered the same thing. Excuse me, I need to make a call. One headed into the hallway. Another ducked into a side room, phone already at his ear. The third simply paced to the window and stared out like he was watching the future burn. The CEO turned to Russell from legal, desperate, and we just say she did this on purpose. Sabotage. We sue. NDA breach. Something. Russell didn't even look up from the table. She didn't breach anything, he said. She didn't modify a single line of code. She didn't touch a credential. She didn't log in after termination. She just stopped existing in the system. And the system reacted exactly the way we told it to. But she knew it would happen. Of course she did, Russell said. She wrote the clause. We agreed to it. You signed off. She planned this. Russell sighed. She protected herself. You're the one who thought synergy was more important than redundancy. The CEO blinked. Can we call her? Russell looked up. You fired her, remember? The aircon kicked on with a faint hum. A drop of sweat traced the CEO's temple. No one offered him a napkin. And then from the far end of the table, a sound, a snort. Someone was laughing. Soft, restrained, almost apologetic. Everyone turned. Was Raymond? The angel investor. First check-in, last to leave. The only one who, during an earlier round of hiring reviews, had pointed at her resume and said, keep her happy. She's the kind of engineer that saves your ass before you know it needs saving. He wasn't laughing hard, just enough for his shoulders to move and the faintest sound to escape. Like someone trying not to lose it at a funeral. Something funny, the CEO snapped. Raymond wiped his eyes, still smirking. You fired the one person who understood your product, he said. Because she didn't use exclamation marks in emails. The CEO opened his mouth. Raymond held up a hand. Save it. He stood up, straightened his blazer, and tucked his phone into his breast pocket. I'm calling my fund, he said. We're pulling our second tranche. Wait, the CEO said. Please. But Raymond was already walking toward the door. As he reached it, he paused. Oh, and next time, said without turning around. Maybe read the contracts before you gut the company. Click, the door shut behind him. The CEO just stood there, lips parted, eyes unfocused. Like a man who had just discovered he was, in fact, the villain in someone else's story. And across the city, in a quiet apartment with a dying plant and an empty coffee cup, she sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, letting the silence settle over her like velvet. Satisfied. Not victorious. Not smug. Just done. The phone rang like it owed me money. Unknown number, Manhattan area code. I let it buzz twice, just enough to let desperation steep, then answered with a lazy yeah. Silence. Then a voice I hadn't heard since he smirked at me across that glass-walled fish tank of a firing room. Hi there. Just wanted to follow up. I didn't speak. Let him sweat. Look, first off, I want to apologize. We've clearly hit a snag and well, after reviewing the contract, some unexpected dependencies surfaced. Unexpected. I said deadpan. Yes, right. So we were wondering if you'd be open to consulting short-term just to help stabilize the environment. I stood from the couch, stretched, wandered into the kitchen with the phone still pressed to my ear. No rush. Let him chase consulting. I echoed like a friendly reunion pizza party and whiteboards. No, of course not. This would be compensated properly. I let a long pause hang in the air long enough to feel like a dial tone. 300 an hour, I said. He choked. I'm sorry. 300 an hour. USD. Not stock options. Not promises. Not crypto or coffee gift cards. Cash in advance. Another beat. You're serious. As your system outage, I said, I assume you're tracking the uptime losses. We are. I could hear paper shuffling. The frantic scribble of someone doing math on the fly. Probably trying to figure out if keeping the lights on was worth a few $1,000s an hour. It was. Fine, he said finally. Voice clipped. Fine. We'll authorize it. I leaned against the counter, one foot tapping against the cabinet. New contract, too. Yes, of course. We'll draft. No executive veto power. Full autonomy on infrastructure decisions. I don't want some slack thread 5 layers deep with a hey let's circle back sabotaging patch approvals. Okay, that's reasonable. Oh, and I'll need new credentials. A pause, longer this time. Well, your old login? No. Not reactivating old ones. I want fresh credentials. Root access system isolation. No shared consoles, no cross-permission admin overlap. If I find a marketing intern with S3 access again, I swear to God, yes. New credentials, he said quickly. Clean. Segregated, just for you. I smiled and pulled the dead aloe plant out of the sink. Finally tossing it. Felt symbolic. I'll send wiring instructions, I said. Can we loop you into the call with legal to know? I cut in. You can send me the contract when it's ready. PDF. I'll sign if it's clean. Another pause, then softer. You're really not going to make this easy, are you? I opened my fridge empty, except for a bottle of mustard and an old lime. Still, I felt full. You made it easy, I said, when you called synergy more valuable than memory, like I hung up first. The room looked different now. Same long table, same cold water pitchers and sad-looking fruit tray. But the energy gone was the swagger, the performative bravado. This wasn't a celebration anymore. It was a reckoning disguised as a meeting. The CEO stood at the front like a man waiting to be sentenced. His tie was gone. Collar unbuttoned. The bags under his eyes looked like he hadn't slept since the crash. Cleared his throat and gestured toward the empty seat at the far end of the table. I'd like to welcome back, temporarily, our former lead engineer as a consultant. She's agreed to assist with the authentication recovery process. No applause. Just the dull tap of someone adjusting their Mont Blanc pen. And then the door opened. I didn't walk in wearing a power suit. No heels, no laptop bag. Just jeans, sneakers, a coffee-stained sweatshirt that read, I void warranties in faded block letters. One of the younger investors blinked, visibly confused. Another whispered, is that? It was. I walked to the far end of the table, not fast, not slow, just steady, like a fuse that had already burned its way to the payload. I didn't shake hands. I didn't smile. I placed a single manila folder on the table and slid it forward, crisp and deliberate. Here's my contract, I said. CEO reached for it. I stopped him with a single tap of my finger. No edits.